Welcome back to the Oscar Project Podcast, the show where I discuss Oscar-nominated films year by year. I am your host, Jonathan Eaterberg, and today I'm bringing you an interview with Emily Sheskin, director of the short film Livestreams with GrandmaPuzzles. Before I jump into the interview, please be sure to subscribe to the show in your podcast player so you can get all the newest episodes as soon as they are released. If you like the interview and want to hear more, please consider leaving a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Emily Sheskin is an award-winning film and commercial director who tells stories full of optimism and resilience without glossing over life's challenges. Her short films have featured in the New York Times, National Geographic, and The Atlantic, while her first feature film, Jesszilla, premiered in 2023 at the Big Sky Documentary Film Festival. It went on to play at festivals around the world and won awards with Slamdance, Fargo, Rhode Island, Ridgefield, and Atlanta film festivals. She is currently one half of the duo behind Chicken Wing Pictures and joins me on the podcast to talk about her documentary short, Livestreams with GrandmaPuzzles. Emily, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I really love your subject in this film. Jigsaw puzzler, she's a devoted grandmother, Adele. How did you come across her? How did you find out about her? And also, what drew you into her story?
Yeah, so for those who don't know, I made a feature, Jesszilla, which was about a young woman who gets a brain cancer diagnosis at 15 that redefines what it means for her to fight. And she was a boxer, and so she went into it with a lot of optimism and resilience. And after making that film, which and you might imagine was a very long and emotional process, it's a
Sure.
10-year in the making. I wanted to switch gears a little and tell something kind of light, but still preserve the optimism and like that spirit of, I think, kindness, empathy, resilience, and just like love for life that Jesselyn had. And I was talking about this with my producer, Ben. And I kind of was saying that, like, I had two big things I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to have some sense of control because as a documentary filmmaker, we're so often thrown into like a hotel ballrooms and fluorescent lighting. I was so tired of it. I wanted to be able to control the image and I wanted to do something kind of fun and joyful and ended up going down a rabbit hole, learned about speed puzzling, speed puzzle events, watched Wicker Kittens, which was out South by Southwest pre-pandemic, learned about the puzzle boom during the pandemic and then after, and reached out to Mike Schultz, who was he was a team member of Wicker Kittens, and kind of asked him how he got involved, if he knew people at these events. And he told me that his partner Val is a board member of the USA Jigsaw Puzzle Association. And that while he was done making movies about this subject, there was this one lady who he believed was a Twitch streaming grandmother who I had to meet and talk to. And I was like, tell me more. And then he introduced me to Val, who introduced me to Adele, who we then got a Zoom call, and I loved her from the second I spoke to her. So that's kind of how it all came to be.
That's fantastic. I love those connections that you make there. Now, you talked a little bit about it there. Obviously, pretty much everyone who's listening to this has probably put together a puzzle at some point in their lives. But for those who don't know, how big is the world of puzzles these days, especially when you talked about the speed puzzling, the competitive world?
Yeah, so it's still pretty niche. I think there's definitely I saw that puzzle sales during the pandemic increased something like 200 to 300%. Insane. So there was this big boom where more people started doing it. And during the pandemic, speedpuzzling.com was a facilitator of sort of Zoom puzzle tournaments. And we spoke to Jonathan. He continues to run events. And as, it became safe for people to see each other in person, a lot of people wanted to connect with folks that they had puzzled with on the internet. And so I definitely have seen how it's grown. The nationals just happened in 2025, but before this, they were doing it every 2 years. So it was 2024 and that was going to be 2026. And so we attended the 2024 nationals, and speaking with Val and the other JPA board members, like, we learned that these events now sell out really quick in a way that they like can't even have anticipated or dreamed. It's like for volunteers who just love puzzling. And so they've seen how like they've needed to scale in a big way. So there is a desire for it. There's also Worlds that happens in Spain. So this is not just like a US phenomenon. So I think the speed aspect is growing, but it is definitely still it's still niche. It's still, the top speed puzzlers, like people know who they are. And it's a thing too where speed puzzling, it's not like, oh, you're the fastest man in the world kind of thing. Depending on the puzzle, people have different strengths and weaknesses. So like if it's a floral, maybe it's gonna go one way. And if it's a gradient, maybe it'll go another way. And so like I learned all about that while making this film and hopefully the feature.
Now, Adele talks in the film about the kind of the sense of community and support she gets from live streaming her puzzling. How important is that in today's world, especially when we're, oftentimes more disconnected from each other, especially those folks as they grow older as well?
Yeah, it's very important. Adele has talked about how she wants to get more seniors on Twitch, either knitting, or doing whatever, just because she loves the community. Anytime she was able to talk about her community, she lit up. They mean everything to her. They're why she gets out of bed. Like she talks about how she was really, really depressed and it was really hard for her to feel like she had any purpose. And this community brought her back to life. So I think community is a really important way of combating loneliness, which I think for those in the US, we've heard that we are experiencing a loneliness epidemic. And there's another documentary called Join or Die that I met that filmmaker at an event, and her film talks a lot about how, as Americans, we used to join clubs, we used to go to picnics, we used to be very involved in sort of our local governments, our PTA, and people are not doing that. We are not participating the way we used to, and loneliness is definitely skyrocketing. So I hope that this film makes people think about the communities that they're a part of, prioritize that, but also validates communities online because I think oftentimes people dismiss if you don't know someone face to face that it's like not a real connection. And I would beg to differ.
Yeah, as you were saying that, it just reminded me a little bit of, I'm sure you've probably seen the documentary, Remarkable Life of Evelyn, that was on
Mm,
Netflix. Similar
yeah.
type, community, obviously video games there, but obviously very similar connections and community that were built with that platform. Now, talk a little bit about how Adele is using her platform to highlight puzzle work that's both created by Black artists and also features Black imagery.
This was something, I mean, obviously I'm a white person, and I have done puzzles, not seriously, just kind of on and off. And when she talked about the fact that she doesn't see a lot of black representation in the images on puzzles, it kind of it was like a light bulb moment. And I was thinking about how crazy that is that this is an activity for everybody. There's obviously a lot of amazing black art throughout the years. And so like the fact that she was going out of her way to sort of find artists and find these puzzles is both obviously very cool, but also something that we should be talking about. Like, why is this the case? And I don't know. The world's largest, I jokingly call them Big Puzzle, but it's Ravensburger and they're a German company. So, I mean, maybe that explains like why Germany is more of a homogenous place, I guess, and not as much these days, but, still it speaks to why, maybe these bigger puzzlers have focused more on either very neutral, like sort of landscape images, whatever, but often when people are in it, they are white. So I love that she is going out of her way to uplift Black both artists and also there's a Puzzles of Color, I believe is their brand, but they are a small business that is actively working to sort of fill this need. And this is a business that they started during the pandemic.
That's fantastic. We'll have to put a link to that in the show notes. Now, shifting back to the film itself a little bit, I loved some of the shots that you have, individual puzzles, individual puzzle pieces, super tight focus on those. What was the process of picking, those subjects of the what sets to film, anything like that that went into picking those shots?
So we have a few puzzles that you see in our film. One is a custom puzzle that we made for Adele with family members because I wanted all of our archival to kind of exist in the puzzle world if I could.
Yeah.
Was it 100% successful? But like pretty good, pretty good. So we have that. Then we have the puzzle that is this is kind of a secret, but we were doing a sizzle as well when we shot this for the larger project. And we have a puzzle that Kyle Kosen, who is a Twitch friend of Adele's, he's also a Twitch streamer. He's a young man from Utah who was at a puzzling tournament that we attended. And he gave us a puzzle that he did at that tournament that we then gave to Adele. So that's the one with the border where it has writing. And then the last puzzles are from an artist, Jaleel Campbell, who Adele specifically talked about was like, his art is fabulous. She connected us. He is so cool. And we got permission to use that imagery. And so those are when we talk sort of about representation, we're using his work. So those are the three different kind of puzzles that we had. And a lot of it was to facilitate the story we knew we were telling. And then we thought about, how important it was, for example, we knew we were going to need to see her family, right? So that puzzle had to be completed. And then I knew I wanted more of her going from the beginning. So that was the puzzle that Kyle gave her. And then obviously needing to see black imagery, we needed those to be mostly done. So my producer and I, during a hurricane in Los Angeles, put those together in varying finished lengths, as well as our director of photography, Joe Victorine. So we came to set with a bunch of those like mostly done, and then she was able to complete them.
That's really cool. Now, I know every film has its challenges, but what were some of the other specific challenges that you encountered for this film?
Besides the hurricane, there was one elevator in this. We shot in a pier space in Los Angeles. I mean, for those who don't know, Los Angeles, no surprise, is a bit of a film city. And so we found this space that allowed us to film, and it had these like colorful areas, which was exactly kind of what we envisioned. And we had worked with Angelique George as a art director who gave us this like color palette and some ideas. And so that was where our head was when we went into it. And wouldn't you know it, the elevator broke.
Oh, no.
Yeah. For normal people, you're like, okay, like you'll take the stairs. But when you have a dolly, that is really difficult. So we had that was, I think, the biggest challenge. And I jokingly have pictures I call the sad boy pictures of my producer and director of photography, just sort of sitting in the lobby, staring at like a bunch of gear with the realization like we're all gonna have to haul this up like a couple flights of stairs. But
Right.
we got it done.
Of course. Well, I have a couple of questions not specifically related to the film, but before I move on, is there anything else you want to touch on about live streams with Grandma Puzzles?
No, I think that's it. I mean, we're playing around the US and various film festivals. We have an Instagram called Puzzle People Doc, so I hope people follow us and see if it's playing near them. But yeah, we're just excited that the film has been getting as much love as it's been getting because we want to talk about these. We talk about sort of the importance of representation, and we talk about like loneliness and depression, and also combating that with community. But ultimately, like we want to be kind of a bit of joy, a bit of sunlight in someone's day. I get the feedback that our film makes people smile from start to finish, and that's a credit to Adele. And so come out. It's a fun time.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. I enjoyed the film thoroughly. Well, this might be the hardest question I ask, but if you had to pick your top three films of all time, what would they be?
Right. So this is a mean question for a filmmaker. It is really hard, and I have three, but then I also have special mentions. And I think film is so personal, right? It is such a personal thing. Different films mean different things to different people. So the first is my favorite filmmaker is Miyazaki, and it's ironic that a documentary filmmaker loves an animator who controls every frame. But I think that's part of why I love him so much. I just think he's a master. Every frame is a masterpiece, and that is his doing. And I love Nausicaä of the Valley of the Wind, which is a wonderful film. I know people probably know him more from Spirited Away or Princess Mononoke, but for me, that film, I think it was one of the first films where I'd seen sort of a princess with the kind of agency that princesses don't typically get in American movies. And also, I love the fact that there's no like romance or like love interest. And it is literally about it's an environmental story. It's like about how the earth is healing itself from the damage that humans do. So, like a climate change story told in a really interesting and such a beautiful way. So, that's my one. My number two is a Disney movie. It is The Little Mermaid. What's been interesting is as I've gotten older, I've heard a lot of feedback from people who are on the spectrum that they love this movie. If you've been watching Love on the Spectrum, Abby from Love on the Spectrum talks about how she loves Little Mermaid because she wasn't able to talk and she related a lot to Ariel. And I found out that I am on the spectrum and I also love The Little Mermaid, but I think it has to do with this. representation in a way of seeing someone trying to fit in who is very out of place, but still make it work in a way that is authentic to her. And that is why that movie means a lot to me. And then the third, have to do a documentary, and it's The King of Kong: A Fistful of Quarters. Love that movie. I'm a video game nerd too. I love the sort of like antagonist of Billy Mitchell. I don't know how he is a real person. I know they're coming out with a sequel, but that world is just so fun and interesting, and I loved being able to be part of it. My special mentions are all documentaries. Capturing the Friedmans, because the edit is fantastic, and I love how in my mind, I think it's pretty objective as a filmmaker. There's this did he, didn't he, and this gray zone that it lives in. The second is the Art Star and the Sudanese twins, which I don't think a lot of people have seen if you didn't see it in like 2008 at Hot Docs or like MoMA. Fantastic movie. And then the third is Jesus Camp. So all sort of like early 2000s documentaries, but that's because that's like when I was in school and those really shaped my formative years.
Wonderful. Some good recommendations there. Now, if you could invite any three movie characters to your next dinner party, who would they be and why?
So this was also a very hard question, but I've narrowed it down to Jean-Luc Picard, Captain Picard, because I love Star Trek. That was like my thing as a kid. And technically there are Star Trek movies, so it counts.
Yeah, it counts.
I also love Doctor Strange. So Stephen Strange was number two. And then I had a really hard time picking the third. And so it was either Clarice Starling from Silence of the Lambs or Elle Woods from Legally Blonde. One of the 2, and then special mention if you could do TV, I would do Leslie Knope, because I wanna see Leslie Knope interact with Stephen Strange.
I think Picard and Strange would get along well, and whether it was Starling or Elle Woods would definitely change the dynamic with those other
Yeah.
two. Now, any books you could recommend that you've read recently or really enjoy? They could be fiction or nonfiction and don't have to be related to movies.
So, I read Lenin's Tomb, which is, written by Jonathan Resnick. He was a New Yorker writer, and it is about the rise and fall of the USSR. I read it because I've been very curious kind of about cultural politics and everything that's happening now, and, I wanted to kind of learn what made Putin Putin. And I think the book is both fantastic from it's shockingly entertaining. And very he's a fabulous writer. And so like even though you are learning about history and a lot of it is very difficult, it is one of the most engaging sort of history books I've read. The second, Reaganland, I think is just really timely. I'm currently reading that now. Reagan at the time was a far right candidate. So no matter what your politics are, I think it's really interesting to see how these themes in United States politics continue to kind of come back. There's a lot that's happening now with like the Panama Canal, et cetera, that's kind of from the Reagan era. And I had no idea being like an 80s baby. So like learning about that history is really, really fascinating. And then the third, if you want just like a really nice cozy read, which has nothing to do with history, The Spellshop. I loved that book so much. And it was a book where I could kind of like escape and turn off my brain and like live in this like really nice world.
Wonderful. We'll put some links to those so people can check them out if they've never read them before. Who else from the world of film should I have on the podcast?
I mean, that's a hard one. I do think, what's wonderful about these kinds of things is that you're able to talk to smaller filmmakers like myself and other creatives. I would say I think Paul Yee, who was my cinematographer on Jessilla. I'm gonna shout him out, and also Joe Victorine and Kyle Dietz. These are all three very different cinematographers who I've worked with. They all have a very different way of approaching material, and they're all incredibly talented and have worked on such a wide variety of film that they would be fantastic to talk to.
Wonderful. Well, we'll try and get a hold of them and see what we can do about getting them on. And lastly, before we wrap up, do you have any other projects that you have lined up, and where can people follow you on social media? I know you already mentioned the Instagram. Anything else where people can follow you?
Yeah, so Puzzle People Doc for all of the Puzzle People updates. Livestreams with Grandma Puzzles is sort of part of this Puzzle People project that we've been doing. We did a Puzzle People podcast. We're hoping to make a Puzzle People feature, which is what we're currently working on. And then all of my work is, you can see either on chickenwingpictures.com, which is with my producer, or emilysheskin.com, which is my like commercial reel. And you can follow me on Instagram, although like I'm really bad at posting on Instagram, but I'm at Emily Sheskin. So, but I think I have 6 posts and I always forget, and then I end up like archiving them all and like starting over. So, you know.
No worries. Well, we'll put links to all of those so people can check those out. Well, Emily, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. Really loved the film and loved hearing a little bit about what went into making it.
Yeah, thank you for your thoughtful questions. This is a lot of fun.
Thank you again to my guest today, Emily Sheskin. Her short film, Livestreams with GrandmaPuzzles, will continue playing at film festivals throughout 2025. She also wanted to call out 2 more people in film after we stopped recording: Alina Simone, director of Black Snow, and Elizabeth Lowe, director of Mistress Dispeller, both of which will be included in the show notes. The Oscar Project podcast is written and produced by me, Jonathan Eacherberg, with editing assistance from Joshua Eacherberg. If you want more movie coverage, check out the Oscar Project online at theoscarproject.substack.com. I'll be back on Friday with Enrico Banson to discuss the 1928 film Glorious Betsy, and next Tuesday when I interview Lauren Melinda about her film Before You. Until then, I hope to see you at the movies.